Okay, good morning. How are you? Glad to hear it. Listen, today I'm going to talk. Uh, I may also sometime today do something piano related, but today I'm going to talk books, books. I'm still reading on the Far East. I'm still reading about World War II in the Pacific. And I got two books. And I am trying to do something with the history of Europe and England. I'm reading some books that are somewhat scholarly, but not too awful scholarly. I'll show you one. One's an old one. I think it's, you can tell it's old, right? Yeah. It says, Chapters in Western Civilization, Columbia University Press. And I don't know, I knew the date of this publishing. See if I still can pick it out. Well, 1948. So 70, 75 years old. And I pick up a lot of these books, like on the history of Europe and stuff. And usually I don't get too far because they're not to my liking. But this one I like. I'm getting information that I want to get. So we'll stick with it. I think I got a couple more going on too. But the books I want to talk about today, there's two of them. And these are primarily on World War II and the Far East. Like, for example, this first one, I mean, you know it's on the Far East because the title is The China Mirage by James, fix his last name, Bradley. James Bradley. And if you don't know it, his dad was one of the men who mounted the American flag on Mount Suribachi on Iwo Jima in World War II. So this fella's premise is that we got so much baloney propaganda during World War II about China that practically everything we did was done based on erroneous facts. And what I distill from this book is that those erroneous facts led to the demise, the death in war of many a young man, many a young American. And I'll go on to give you some of the points that lead me to that. But let me just show you the other book. Now, this book is done. This is a book I've been reading for a while. The China, Burma, India Theater, Stilwell's Mission to China. This is a U.S. Army book. You know, some colonels are instructed to go into the archives, go into the War History Department, and write about Stilwell's campaign. So, because of this book, I now know that you're talking about theaters of war in the Pacific during World War II. CBI stands for China, Burma, India. And it's given little news coverage. Well, at least in modern times, we don't hear too much about World War II and the Far East and China and the Pacific. We don't really hear too much about that. Whereas we hear a great deal about World War II in Europe. Why that is, I can't really say other than, well, the Americans are mostly European descendants, so they're interested in what happened to Germany, what happened to Italy, England, Ireland. However, those demographics are rapidly changing, and pretty soon you could see that many Americans are going to be wanting to know more and more about what their ancestors did during World War II in the Far East. And they'll be looking to get these histories. Now, I noted once before in these talks that when I went into the library and I was looking for books on World War II, particularly in the Far East, I found that, the number of books on the shelves for Europe were just many, many, many more volumes on that, the European aspect of World War II, than on the Far East. And now, because I went back, I was still looking for books. Neither of these are library books, by the way. And the more recent visits to the library, I'm noticing that the shelves are becoming barer and barer, less and less books on the shelves, which I don't want to jump to conclusions, but it would seem to me that the library systems are going paperless. Not a good thing, but that's what they're going to do. That's what they're going to do. So, wow, that's my supposition. When I see no books on the shelves, what are you going to think? They must be getting away from books, which is the way of the world. Everybody's getting away from the world. You have to have your little handheld gizmo. It's the only way you can put something from the external world into your brain now. That's the only way. You got to have a little gizmo, and that will make you an instant intellectual. You have that little gizmo. You punch in English Channel. You know everything you need to know about the English Channel in 75 words, no less. Let me point that out. So the thing with James Brady's book, The China Mirage, he tells it in a very, I want to say, a fairly down-to-earth style. He's not being highly theoretical. He's not making, important historical points. He's just telling it like it is, And so I get a brain readjustment because, from a young man, a young boy being educated by the diocesan priests, I came to believe that Chiang Kai-shek was, a real, not only a saint, but a hero. This guy was the real deal. According to Bradley's book, Chiang Kai-shek was a snake in the grass. That's all he was. Snake in the grass. He more or less kowtowed to the Song sisters. Meilei, Ailey, Kumlei, three names that sound like that, the sisters. They would tell him what to do. And at least two of them had their names in mind. They had a lot to do and a lot to say to the United States government during World War II. They would get up in front of Congress and tell them what the deal was going on over there in China. And of course, the congressmen knowing nothing about China, because at that point there was very little education on China. What could they do but believe these women that were thrown at them, Madam Chiang Kai-shek and Mei Ling, whatever, and Ailing. What could they do but say, well, listen, these they're from there, they're telling us what's going on over there. We're going to believe and base our policies on that. And we're going to spend the Americans' money based on that. Now, that being said, while I bring this up, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind, and there hadn't been a lot, but since reading the China Mirage, there's no doubt in my mind that we were dragged into tremendously bad positions because of the mirage, the propaganda that was spread across America by these, he's got a name for it, the China lobby, I think he calls it, and leading eventually to Vietnam, although worse things happened before that, at the end of the 30s, I think that's the 1930s, 1940s during the war. Terrible, terrible numbers of people dead, ships sunk, all that stuff. And basically we had the wool pulled over our eyes. We, the great power, by this little termite over there in Japan, and we were sold a bill of goods that with all this money, and there's at least one splurge of money that went to him, one fell swoop, $100 million. In those days, I mean, it's like billions today, but $100 million right to Chiang Kai-shek, who did not use it to keep the Japanese out of his country, which is what we thought he was going to do. No, he fought Mao Zedong. That's what he did with that money. And you know what? He never won a battle against Mao. Never, not even one. And there were plenty of them. And Mao always won. He should tell you something. If not for anything, we backed the wrong pony in that race. And I don't think when that was going on, he had already swung big time towards the communists. Eventually he did, because Papa Joe was at this time, dealing out the money and the tanks. And Mao said, hey, I'll go with this horse, But he would have changed in a heartbeat, like all those guys, those people. They can't be trusted. They cannot be trusted. They can't be trusted today. They couldn't be trusted yesterday. Anyway, so he, in the China Mirage, he definitely covers what happened and how it happened. FDR definitely got the wool pulled over his eyes. He was just, he had a tremendous ego, as we all know, and he could not be wrong. There's no way. FDR could not be wrong, and it was going to be his way or the highway. Now, this book shows you how Washington works. I believe it's showing you. It's documented. It's, with individual cases, names, the whole thing. Washington is run today the way it was run in 1940, 1943, 1944. Same way. Lobbyists. Now, in the book, it's pointed out that the lobbyists came from people who, appointments would come from people who were already in the government, who were cherry picking the latest graduates from Harvard and Yale and Princeton and Columbia and so on. And some of the lesser institutes, University of Pittsburgh jumps to mind, University of Illinois jumps to mind, and so on. So they were cherry picking people who had the ideals that they were going to foster, okay? And the big debate at the time was, do we send Japan oil and scrap metal so that they can continue to bomb the Chinese and kill the little baby Chinese and kill the women and the children? Should we be sending the ammunition that the Japanese needed to carry out their warfare on the Chinese people? Now, that was the big issue. So they would cherry pick guys from these prestigious universities who were the same mindset. Now, the most popular mindset was that we cut off, we embargo all aid. That was the most popular mindset. But according to Bradley, FDR didn't like that. And some others in his cabinet, and so they didn't like that because they felt, and they know everything. Don't forget now, we're talking about people who know everything. They felt that, well, if we embargo Japan's oil, two things are going to happen. They're going to go south and take over the Dutch, Netherlands, Indonesia. Right? Netherlands, Indochina, whatever they called it. You know the places, Sumatra, Java, and so on. And they were going to get their oil from there, Papua New Guinea. And so, you know, in his way of doing things, and FDR was, unfortunate to say, he was not adverse to working without the knowledge of the American people and doing little end runs around Congress and the Constitution. He was not against that personally. So his plan was to make it look like the embargo on oil was going down, but he had set up a back door where oil could be bought by some other entity and then funneled into into Japan. So that was a way to skirt the American law, to skirt the American Congress, okay? And this is the president. I mean, what president skirts the Congress in such a vile manner? I mean, of course, once in a while, they're not going to do what the Congress wants, but to essentially, you know, help the enemy. You know, and of course, his rationale was that this was going to keep us out of war with Japan by giving them oil. Yeah, sure. You can't make up how wrong all this decision making was in Washington during World War II. It was so wrong, so short-sighted. It's just terrible. But, you know, and the same thing had gone on with Teddy in World War I. Same thing. Everything he did came back to bite him. Same thing with FDR. Now, there are statements in FDR's speeches after Pearl Harbor about embargoing. And he stands up and says, there was no embargo. What are these people saying? We should have embargoed them. There was no embargo. And yet he knew all along that there was a fake embargo, and he was giving the Japs the oil. The same oil they used to put in their planes to come over Pearl Harbor and dive bomb and bomb the American fleet. I mean, if people knew the history of these folks in Washington during these critical times in the history of the American people, I don't think they'd be flocking up to Hyde Park to venerate the poor guy. I just don't think so. Now, and keeping in mind that all that money that made them, the Roosevelts, came from the selling of dope, opium, to the Chinese. Just keep that in mind. So, poor Johnny Umagaligo on some corner avenue in the Bronx gets thrown in the cooler for selling a couple of ounces of dope, but not the big guys, including Queen Victoria. That's how she made her empire. I've talked about this before, so you know it. The British Empire was built on the sale of opium. By the way, I'm doing this talk first thing in the morning, so I get to drink my coffee with it. It's a good idea. So, if you like a very technical description of all the deceit and dishonesty that went on in Washington during World War II, this is the book to go to. You'll be fully schooled in the intrigues and how Washington works. You'll be really surprised at the money that changes hands to get all of this to work. Now, people will say, well, listen, we won the war. I find it hard to say that what happened in the Far East can be described as a victory. People were slaughtered. That's no victory. That's a defeat for humanity. I don't want to sound like some know-it-all, humanity. Who uses such a word? Nobody even knows what it is. Listen, but I can't see World War II in the Pacific as a victory. For example, look at the end. The end opened up the nuclear age. That's insane. Insane. Also, well, it wasn't this book, but, they go around touting that the Manhattan Project and the development of the bomb, that was this guy, Oppenheimer, what's his name? Somebody Oppenheimer. A big movie was made out of him recently. Now, it was a major general who had succeeded very well on some other large projects, and that's the person they put in charge to develop the atomic bomb from day one. He picked Oppenheimer. He had to scrutinize all the candidates for the scientific lead. He picked Oppenheimer, this major general. He should be the one that we're turning to when we say who developed the bomb. This major general, I can't think of his name. This very unmilitary looking dude in his uniform, but he got the job done, which also, they go to specific persons who they know has gotten the similar jobs done in the past. Same thing when it came to building things like the B-29 tanks, ships. They turned to people who had already succeeded in large-scale industrial work. So they turned to, I believe, the CEO, chairman of General Motors, to manufacture the B-29s, which at the time was the biggest thing ever made on the planet. And the bomber, I think they made like near 6,000 of them. That essentially was the coup d'etat for Japan. And I'm pretty sure they were used in the European side of the war too. But the Nagolgay, whatever the word is for that plane that brought the atom bomb, was a B-29. So the General Motors got that going, and that was no small deal. That was a big deal. Nothing like it had ever been done before. This was a gargantuan effort gargantuan. The ships, they said I think they want 70,000 Liberty ships. And these Liberty ships, they were big. They were like ocean liners, essentially. And they would bring the troops and the cargo over. So they hired a guy who was a top-notch industrialist. He'd never built a ship. None of these guys did. They didn't do ships. They didn't do airplanes, nothing. They did cars, you know. So they got this one guy, I forget from where, and he looked at the problem. I think he went down to San Diego, a few other places, looked around, and he came back with, he built all the sections of the ships in sections, smaller sections that can be dealt with a crane. And then he brought them together, welded them up, and then he had a ship. Before you know it, he was getting something like 100 and something ships out in a little over a month. And, I mean, he essentially made, this major change in the war where the United States, America, could get troops wherever they needed them quickly. The stuff that was coming at Japan and coming at Germany out of the factories of the United States is just mind-boggling, as they say. But this isn't covered in this book. It's covered elsewhere. Bradley's book, I is highly recommended because it is quite an easy read. It's not technical, and I believe it's very mind-opening. I mean, it certainly put me in a different light. Am I thinking about FDR? Basically, I thought FDR was a really good guy. Come to find out that he really wasn't. But I never liked Theodore Roosevelt. He was never one on my list of people to like. But FDR, thought, well, he saved the country from the Depression. He did this, he did that. What I found out about him in the China Mirage is just bumped him down quite a few notches. He was gullible. He loved to have yes men around him. By the way, just like Chiang Kai-shek, who in certain eras, in certain times, he was considered a savior of his people, when in fact he was a dictator. He was a dictator, just like Joe Stalin, just like, I don't want to say like Hitler, because Hitler has that Holocaust massacre on his conscience, on his hands. Chiang Kai-shek certainly murdered millions of people, no doubt about it. But he didn't have the genocide so much. And in a way, maybe you could call it genocide, because he would target certain populations and destroy them. Chiang Kai-shek, the United States and him were like buddy. It's just, and like I said, these are the people within Washington that controlled the affairs of times during World War II, before, during, and after. And these are the same people, the same type of people from the same background who are in Washington controlling things today. Okay? That's what we have in our government. We have these people who have no problem with being deceitful, with lying to the public. That's who is in our government. And we're fat, dumb, and happy with it because we're getting our 3 meals, we got roofs over our head, we got no bombs falling down on us. And by the way, I personally believe there's a pretty big reason why no bombs or people are invading us. Because thanks to the NRA, we have like 1 million armies all over the place because individuals can, in this country, own guns. So if you're Mao Tse-Tung's grandson thinking about invading the United States, and you ask your general, well, what kind of weaponry do they have? What's their armament about? And that guy in charge of the army of China says, well, they have about 50 million armies. So you better think twice before you invade them. That's my take on the whole thing. There's bad downsides, bad downsides. And with the guns in this country, we know that. I'm not saying that I agree with any of that, but I read the writing on the wall. Nobody's coming in and marching over our streets because they know everywhere they turn, there's a stockpile of ammunition and people just chomping at the bit to kill all of them. Listen, you want us to deny it, deny it. I don't care. It doesn't, no skin off my nose. But trust me, those millions and millions of guns in people's basements and garage, that's what's keeping the bad guys out. Not the nuclear. Nobody wants nuclear. That's over. You get some wacko that doesn't know anything in power. It could happen, but generally speaking, the nuclear threat is basically over. However, I don't think we're going to be able to keep up this little disguise of 10 million armies scattered around the United States, forever. The new technologies will figure it out. They'll send little things the size of a BB, shoot them into the country, and the BB will be able to sniff out all the arms and blow them up. There's no end to it, folks. I'm sorry. Now, the other book that I read and finished was the book on Stilwell. And everything you've heard about Stilwell and Burma and so on, you'll get the details in here. You'll get the details. They're not happy details. The task of fixing what the British pretty much broke by allowing Singapore to fall, Malay to fall, Burma to fall. The task of fixing it fell on, of course, for the most part, the American shoulders. Now, this already was happening before we were at war. So whatever we could do, we had to do without a declaration of war. So Stilwell was sent over there to kind of be an advisor. He was given certain military status, for example, as Chiang Kai-shek's chief of staff, and everything was hunky-dory for a little while, but, once again, Chiang Kai-shek got in the way. He couldn't stand having somebody who knew more about war and how to handle an army than he did, because he knew essentially nothing, Chiang Kai-shek. Well, he knew nothing. But and Stilwell was definitely not a yes man. I mean, he was not. He would say no to Roosevelt. He would say no to Marshall. He was not a yes man. So this infuriated Chiang Kai-shek. But Stilwell stuck at it. He had some tremendous tasks that he had to complete, which he did. And then basically in the course of 2 years, he got a certain part of the Chinese military program set up, ready to go, and retake Burma, which was no small task. No small task. And in the middle of all of that, there was one battle, and I believe it was in the area between Assam and Burma, somewhere up there. I'm told that that battle, as unknown as it is, very not talked about, was the single largest battle the British Empire ever endured. And that's saying a lot, but I can't think, Impala, something like that, Impala, somewhere near where the Lido Road, which was going to be a second road to get troops pointed towards China. And England and its partners, its allies, won that war. And this was in a time of Japan having no problem with throwing 1 million men at a battle and knowing full well that many of those men would not come back. Japan had no problem with doing that. Lovely people. Kill them all. That's their motto. You see, if you look at the flag, look behind it, it's in tiny little letters, it says, kill them all. Nice bunch of people. You ever had your head loped off by one of their samurais? So, what else do we have, folks? That may be it. Once again, I'll tell you, I don't know if you can get this book. You might have to go to a special library to get it. The China, Burma, India Theater, Stilwell's Mission to China. Office of the Chief of Military History, Department of the Army. So that's where you'd have to do your digging to get that. And this, although there are a lot of statistics, stats and stuff, it doesn't bog down into technical obscurities. It doesn't. I think it's a well-written book. This is a joy to read because, well, it's not really a joy, but at least the writing is at a level where the average high school graduate should be able to, well, maybe not in these days, be able to read and comprehend. But like I said, I may have to bring that in a little bit because of the known problem with students in reading these days. They prefer to play marbles on their pinball machines or something. Okay, I think I'm done. I hope you enjoyed this little visit. This would be World History for Ordinary People with subtended with this date of 9/5/2024. That's what it's going to look like up on Wilbert Semaphore. Okay, well, now I'll go practice some piano and maybe put a piano clip up here. Maybe. All right, folks. Enjoy the rest of the day. Bye-bye.